Winning football games is not easy. It's an entire team sport with 11 players taking on another 11 players, with each person providing only enough advantage on average to, if they're good, beat out the guy in front of them. And heck, if they're great, they might be able to account for two opponents and equalize their advantage. But the value of a single player is typically not enough to take a team from the middle of the pack and push them over the top, much less a team that's below average into the ranks of an elite team. But today we're going to take a look at the man who was able to do so much more than his position requires. A man who not only could beat one man, who wouldn't just make up for another poor player, but would carry the entire Louisville Cardinals on his shoulders. The man as you know him is Lamar Jackson. But for those of you who didn't keep up with his time at Louisville, then you may not know how much of a dominating force he was. So as I usually do, let me take you back to the 2016 season. As far as offensive weapons were concerned, Louisville had no weapons. His wide receiver one was senior wide receiver Jamari Staples, who, to be as nice as I can be, was a very solid college wide receiver, and that's about it. The future NFL players he had on his offense were future journeyman wide receiver Reggie Bonifant and future journeyman offensive lineman Jerron Christian. Not exactly a stacked offense going into week one, but what you're going to see is the team played far and above the level they were expected to. Their first game was really supposed to be a cakewalk regardless. They were taking on a Charlotte team that had never really proved themselves to belong in the FBS despite being there for quite some time now. But regardless, they were still an FBS team. They still had talent. But a Lamar-led Louisville team would take the Niners out behind the shed and put them down like Old Yeller to the tune of 8 motherfucking touchdowns in the first half. And we knew Lamar was about to be special because he accounted for 286 yards of passing coupled with 119 yards of rushing for 405 yards of total offense. And all of that was pretty much in the first half, as he would just pick up play after play of chunk yardage as he made the Niner defense look like D3 playing against NFL and nowhere close to 2 D1 teams playing. It's also worth noting that it was pretty much just him that made this team look goofy. He got his 119 yards off in just 11 carries. The other 3 running backs got a total of 17 carries, but only were able to account for 110 yards in those carries. And it wasn't like Lamar was just passing to wide open receivers. He was having to slice and dice the coverage, performing surgery with a football in his arm. But getting the cakewalk out of the way, now he has to take on a real ACC team in Syracuse. And once again, don't get me wrong, it's not like the Big Orange is known for being a defensive heavy team, but even then, the things Lamar was about to do to this team would have been impressive if he did it against the defensive equivalent of a wet napkin, much less an ACC opponent. I'm talking about Lamar throwing on Cuse for 411 yards, piecing apart their coverage until they forced him to run the ball, and when they did, boy did he run, leaving defenders in the dust, shaking them out of their boots, sometimes hurtling over them for a total of 199 yards, meaning that Jackson single-handedly put up 610 yards of offense on another collection of his peers. That should just never happen, but as much as it shouldn't, and as much as no other player, or heck, no other offense would put up that many yards on Syracuse, including a number 2 ranked Clemson who, while scoring 54 points, only put up 565 total yards of offense on them. None of that was as impressive as what you're about to see the following week, because this Louisville team was about to have the current second-ranked team in the country in Florida State come to their house. And apparently, Lamar Jackson didn't take too kindly to top 5 teams existing in the same place as he did, and he showed it by running all over them for 4 quarters, putting up 4 touchdowns on the ground and 146 yards. And when they stopped him from running, easy. He'd just throw it over top for another 216 yards, putting up another 5 touchdowns on his own, making a number 2 team in the country look completely silly. But this season wasn't just all guts and glory, with Lamar making everyone look stupid. Let me take you to a week 5 matchup against the Clemson Tigers. Now this was arguably one of the best Clemson Tiger teams to ever take the field. They had 13 future NFL players on their defensive roster at this time, as well as more than enough firepower on their offense, featuring Ray McLeod and Mike Williams being thrown to by Deshaun Watson. The difference in the talent on this roster showed heavily in the first half, with the Tigers taking an 18-point lead, and Lamar looking completely stifled, held to just a lone touchdown. But the second half would paint a completely different picture, as a 2-touchdown third quarter pulled them within 2 points with the help of a lone field goal, and the fourth quarter would be a dogfight. Lamar took the reins with 14 minutes left after a forced fumble and drove 72 yards to get in range for a chip shot field goal, miraculously giving Louisville a 1-point lead after being down 18 points not too long ago. A quick interception by Watson gave Jackson another opportunity to cook, and he got right to work, putting the ball in the end zone in just 4 plays. Unfortunately, a huge 77-yard kickoff return, guys, kickoffs are important, would put a halt to the momentum they had been building as Watson was able to connect with Williams for a 20-yard touchdown. The next drive would be a quick one, an underthrown pass for an incompletion, check down for a medium gain, and then his pocket collapses, a lineman gets his hands up, deflecting a pass to force a punt. Here, the Clemson offense would drive the entire length of the field, going 85 yards and getting the 2-point conversion, but hey, we knew they were good. But this would leave just 3 minutes left for Lamar to make a miracle happen, and he was delivering. Whether it was on his legs or with his arms, play after play, chunk after chunk, he would work his way down the field until they were within striking range. 1st and 10 from the 12-yard line. One quick check down pass to pick up 3 yards. The next play, he looks and there's nothing, so he runs it for no gain. On 3rd down, he breaks 1 tackle, makes another man miss, pumps, makes a 3rd man miss, throws a dart, maybe a little bit far, but damn, the Clemson defensive back was tackling the tight end as he was attempting to catch it, and even then he got 2 hands on it, so there was a chance that the game could have just ended right there. Now 4th and 7, and okay, somebody jumps, back it up for 4th and 12. Jackson steps back, sees a man in space, and delivers a dart to give him time and space to make a play, and he just does it. A great open field attempt or a poor running attempt to get the 1st down marker, depending on how you look on it, and it's a turnover on downs. And yes, Clemson just had better defenders, and Jackson's incredible efforts can't make up for everything, but without a doubt, he's the sole reason they were in this game they otherwise had no business being in. But Lamar's 457 yards of total offense this game were some of the hardest earned you'll ever see, and the rest of the season was history after that point. Lamar would go on to throw for an insane 3,543 yards and rush for another massive 1,571 yards, accounting for 51 touchdowns this season. This would be more than enough to have him win the Heisman Award, and I don't think anybody could argue with it, especially as he'd account for their leading passer every single game, as well as being their leading rusher 10 out of the 12 games, as he was quite literally the most important player on the Louisville field. This is just 2016, and Lamar wasn't drafted till 2018, so there's a whole nother year that hardly gets any love, and his 2017 season is so much more impressive for so many reasons. Effectively, the Louisville roster hadn't gotten any better. Lamar was now a known quantity as he made splashes, and even though teams were game planning around him before, he had a bigger target on his head since they didn't want to let him be crowned as a back-to-back Heisman. On top of this, Jackson was trying to prove himself to be as good of a passer as he was a runner to beat the running back allegations, and do that he would. His first game, he'd come out against Purdue and tear them apart for 378 yards with his arm while still running all over them for 107. His next game, he had ripped Carolina a new one, throwing for 394 yards and rushing for 131, accounting for a massive 6 touchdowns and 525 yards by himself. And while these would be the 2 best games by Jackson, while the weight of his team weighed him down, it basically became increasingly clear, game after game, that if you could shut down Lamar, you could shut down Louisville. And with this in mind, seeing how much he had to work just to get any play to go his way, you'll see how much weight he just carried for his team. But when you break down his passes, he had gotten so much more accurate during this time. A lot of times his receivers wouldn't have great separation, and it's not like interceptions were always coming off bad passes or poor decision making. A lot of times he just didn't have a great option, and receiver's mistake would cost him that valuable stat line. And all of that added up to him being completely underrated and looked over by scouts. They never could see him as being a top level passer, and they couldn't look past how quick his feet were because his team around him gave him so little to work with as far as passing, even though statistically he became a much better passer, throwing for a 59% completion percentage, which is 3% higher than he was his Heisman winning year, with more passes overall. But still, scouts would use this to say that he wasn't even part of the most elite quarterbacks in the class, you know, like the top level talents like Josh Rosen or Baker Mayfield, where UCLA wasn't even that much better with Rosen, and OU wasn't that much worse without Baker. Meanwhile, Louisville went from being an ACC contender every year, always competing and being a hard team to beat as long as Jackson was there, to being an absolute joke the minute he left, falling to 2-10 the following year, exposing their ridiculously weak running scheme and offensive line, as the Cards wouldn't have a rusher break 50 yards across multiple games this season. Meanwhile, with the power of hindsight, we could see that Jackson truly was the only special talent in this class at the quarterback position, and I would argue we should have known this even without hindsight. But let me know, is Jackson one of the most underrated college players of all time? Let me know in the comments. Have a good day and peace.